Welcome. Glad you're here. We're so excited to host this event today and have you here in this space. We're really excited about it. We're in year 2 and have seen a lot of great things for kids as you walk through this building. Part of me is glad that the kids aren't here because you get to kind of really see the space, but the other part of me is like, dang, I wish you could see it with students in the building because it's really special. It really is. I think it's important. I just want to kind of ground us a little bit in where you're at, who we are, Winchester Public Schools, etc. This is a story about a community's commitment to public education, okay? Not just this building, but Winchester Public Schools. And for those of you who may live in and around Winchester, you may know some of the story about the Winchester Public Schools, but I can honestly tell you in my 7 years, I've started to peel back the layers of that story, and I am so proud and impressed with this community's historical commitment to public education for all kids, right? And that matters. I hope you believe that. I hope you believe that public education matters for all kids. And spaces matter. And the quality of the spaces matter. And the aesthetics matter. Okay? Let me tell you who we are. We just found out last week. Our free and reduced lunch population right now, what do you think? Throw out some numbers. You drove through our city. Oh, you nailed it. Dang. 77%. Right? If you were downtown, if you're on the Walking Mall, if you're in the old historic neighborhood, if you come to my neighborhood where I live, you would never believe that. You would be like, no way. This is a strong middle, upper class community, right? When I came here 7 years ago, we were at 58%. Okay, so we're now at 77%. 42% of our kids are Hispanic. Many of them are first-generation immigrants, undocumented, right? Last year we had over 100 students come for the first time, many of them as secondary students from Mexico, Guatemala, El Salvador, and they are first-generation students here in the United States. 11% African-American, 8% multiracial, 36% white, okay? So we are what they call a majority-minority school division. Over 60% of our students are students of color, 77% free and reduced lunch, etc. And I'm here to tell you that the places that we have, not just this place, this is a shining new example, but you know about Hanley High School, right? You saw it when you drove up. Architecture Digest said it was, the most beautiful school in Virginia, I think, right? It matters, and our outcomes are better in part, I believe, because of that. So when we compare our outcomes, so what do I look at, right? I look at SOL scores. I look at graduation rates. I look at dropout rate. I look at attendance. I look at all of these things, right? And as you know, socioeconomics in particular, and English language learners in particular, play a role in your outcomes. A third of my kids don't speak English as their first language, right? So their success rate on English tests are not as good, right? That's just a fact. So when I look at my data compared to other cities like us, I'm happy to say we kick their tail, right? We really do, right? It's really impressive. And so when we look at Lynchburg, when we look at Manassas, when we look at Harrisonburg, when we look at Roanoke, when we look at any other city in the state of Virginia, comparable economics, comparable demographics, we're always head and shoulders above them, and in part because of the investment of this community in public education, okay? And part of that has to do with facilities. The other part has to do with all the operating costs and the quality of our teachers, right? And how we pay our folks, our low class size. Our class size is the envy of many. I think our per pupil funding this year hit $17,000 a kid, right? That matters, and it overcomes a lot of those barriers that many of our students have, particularly socioeconomics. And so I'm really proud of that. And as you go back to your communities and support public education, when people say that public schools are overfunded or they don't need as much funding or it doesn't really matter, you tell them to call me, because I can tell them, here's the case study of how when a community commits to public education, outcomes for kids are better, and this community is better because of it, okay? So let's talk about the Innovation Center, why we went down this road. So of my graduates, 40% of my kids go to a 4-year institution. All right, we graduate about 320 kids a year. So that means what? If 40% go to 4-year schools, that means 60% don't, right? They may go to community college, they may go to work, but they don't go right away to a 4-year community college, okay? So off the bat, my high school kids, 60% are not going on to that classic 4-year college, okay? What do we know nationally about kids that enroll in a 4-year college at the age of 18? What's that? A lot of them drop out. Do you know how many? About 50%. You're close. Yeah, about 50% of the kids at 18 years old nationally who walk in the door of UVA or Virginia Tech or JMU, they don't make it. They don't even graduate with their 4-year degree. So if that's true for my kids, what am I now at? Of my total graduating class, about what percent of my graduates actually completed their 4-year degree? About 20%, right? So 80% of my graduates did not complete their 4-year degree when they're 25, let's say, okay? Now, think back to your high school days. Raise your hand if you have children that have gone through high school. I now have a freshman, so I'm dealing with this right now, my first and only kid. What is the message that high school counselors, and me in particular as administrator, have been sending to families and kids for the last 25 to 50 years? What's the message we tell kids? Go to college. That's what we say. We say, go to college, right? And so we've designed our whole secondary school system in this country around getting kids to college, right? And here we know that's for 20% of my kids. And it really begs the question, why? Right? Not because we're going to disparage college. Trust me, I want kids to go to college too. I want first-generation kids to go to college. I believe it's important for equity purposes that we have diverse candidates going to college. So we're not saying we don't want kids to go to college, but college is not a destination. College is a step in the road of your development as a human being to go where you want to go and pursue your hopes and dreams in life, right? And your hopes and dream may be to be an architect. Well, guess what? If that's your hopes and dream, you probably do need to go to college, okay? So college needs to be a means to an end, not necessarily the destination. And in my opinion, I think we've created something where college is almost a destination. It's like a 4-year camp for 18 to 22-year-olds. Many times, and very expensive, by the way. I'm starting to look at that, all right? So very expensive. And many times our kids start there at 18 years old. They change their major 17 times. They may or may not graduate. And many times they graduate in something that they might not even pursue for the rest of their life. And it costs them $250,000 to do it, or mom and dad. Okay? So that's kind of the theory of action behind rethinking how we do or secondary education in public schools. So this is not a plan B. I think that's really important. This school board, our community put a stake in the ground and we said every kid, every graduate will go through the Innovation Center. CTE, Career and Technical Education, is no longer an offering that you may choose. It is something you must choose in order to graduate from John Hanley High School, right? Now you may go on to college, great. We believe that there are transferable skills from welding to carpentry to the health sciences to the advanced technologies. And you may do whatever you do, but there are transferable skills for that. My favorite story is a graduate. She was six years ago, she graduated. And she took welding for 3 years. She took all the AP classes, right, that she could. And this was back when we had valedictorian. We did away with valedictorian about 3 years ago. When we went through the process of eliminating valedictorian salutatorian in Winchester, she was my case study. She was my testimony. And she said, I could have been valedictorian, but I would have had to sacrifice my welding classes. Why? And those of you know the game, right? To take welding and get an A as a top student, what does it do to your overall GPA? It brings it down. Wait a minute, I got an A. I couldn't get any higher of a grade in welding, but it brought my overall GPA down. Why? Because we weight AP classes. And so what happens in high school is kids play games. And they think that if I do X, Y, and Z, I'm going to get into a better college, or I want to be valedictorian, and that's really important to me, right? And so she said, you know what, I'm going to sacrifice my GPA hundredths of a point. Okay, she graduated like a 4.4, right? But she sacrificed hundreds and thousands of a point so she could take what she really cared about, which is welding. And when she applied to Georgia Tech and she wrote her essay, what did she write about? Welding. Did she get into Georgia Tech? Heck yeah, right? When I go to Virginia Tech, NC State, Georgia Tech, those engineering schools, what do the professors tell me? They say, get the best student I got is a kid who took AP Physics and welding, AP Physics and small mechanics, AP Physics and carpentry. Those are my best students as a freshman, right? And so we've got to rethink that and shape the messaging a little differently for our kids, right? The other thing it does is in high schools traditionally, you had two paths. And even though we are a very diverse school, we were somewhat segregated in the school. If you're going to college, you go to these classes, down this hallway. If you go CTE, you go down this hallway. And many times that's segregating by class, by socioeconomic status, and ultimately by race as well. And we said we believe that if every kid takes these CTE classes, it helps with the social cohesion of our community. Because I want all of our kids in that welding class together, right? I want them struggling together. And it's the one opportunity sometimes where your AP advanced student is struggling, right, and trying to figure something out. And a kid who might not be on that honors track going to UVA is like the star of the show. How cool is that? And they're working on the same project together. So that's really the foundation of why we did this and why we're so excited about it. And we're starting to see the fruits of that with our student body. The curriculum. This was our theory of action. We talk about this all the time. We wanted this to be a place where kids could fail and fail fast, where teachers could fail and fail fast. They could try new things. They could experiment. They could say, let's try this today. So this trial, error, reflect was really important to us. Our vision was to create innovative opportunities for our students. I want to park on that word innovation. We were very intentional to not call this a career center, okay? Unfortunately, career centers kind of have a bad rap, right? They continue that stereotype that we have some kids that go this direction and other kids that go that direction. And you could say to me, Dr. Van Hukelum, what's so innovative about the Innovation Center? You're teaching carpentry. That's not innovative. We've been doing that for a long time. What's innovative about the Innovation Center is the learning model, right? It's not just go to carpentry and then go to your math class. It's the 3 hours of time that the kids have here with autonomy and agency, and they are just designing their learning environment that integrates a core academic class, like math, with a CTE class. So my daughter, for example, is here as a freshman. She takes technical drawing, and she takes honors geometry, right? And in their 3 hours, her day is different. You know, when she needs to go all in on technical drawing, those of you who are architects, when you're really into your design process in CAD, do you ever have a bell that says rings and says, stop now, you can't go any further, you got to go to your next appointment, right? No, like sometimes you want to go all in for hours because you're just all in on that design. So when Maggie, my daughter, is doing that and she really is all in on that design, she can spend that time, more time than maybe a typical class, okay? And she can free up time by being more efficient with her geometry or doing some of that at home. And she can say, well, I did all of that at home so I can be all in at school on my technical drawing. It's called a time technology swap too, right? So you may have heard this with technology. We're trying to harness the power of technology for academics so that kids can use digital adaptive tools, what we call playlists for learning, so that kids can learn at a faster rate, maybe their English, social studies, science, or math, so they can spend more time in the carpentry lab where you can't really accelerate a carpentry project, right? It just takes time, so we need to find that time. Next slide. So this gives you a good picture. Let's run through this. So you have your 3 skills. Project-based learning is the glue that connects our CTE classes to our core academics. As you can imagine, this requires a lot of collaboration with our teachers, and it certainly does. All right. This is also really important, and you've heard this before, I'm sure. This is something that education has been talking about for a number of years, right? What we call 21st century skills. So what do we know? We know that despite all the time and effort that we spend teaching kids how to read, do math, science, etc., industry has been screaming at K-12 education. Colleges and universities have been screaming at K-12 education and said, hey, thank you, but your kids, when they graduate and they're 18, they don't know how to collaborate. Like, they don't know how to work in a group. They're not really good critical thinkers. Now, I could spend a whole nother lecture on standardized testing and why I think that affects critical thinking. We've told kids that there's a problem with only four answers and only one of them's right. And you and I know in the real world that when there's a real problem, there's sometimes 100 answers and 17 of them are right or better or best for the unique situation. But our kids have been programmed almost to think like there's this one answer and they can't even think past that, right? So that's critical thinking. Communication, etc. And so in those PBLs, project-based learning experiences, as they're learning math combined with carpentry, they're also metacognitively thinking through their role in communication, critical thinking, citizenship, creativity, etc. And we have elaborate rubrics for our teachers and our kids to self-evaluate on these 5 domains. So how are you doing with collaboration? What does collaboration look like? We intentionally put kids in different groups. So if I'm in a pair, it's going to look different than if I'm in a group of 4 and than if I'm in a group of 10, right? And there are different skills required depending on the size of the group and how you collaborate with those different folks in your group, okay? Is that all I got? Or am I doing this too?
So,
yeah, okay. If I don't get home in 12 minutes, my wife may divorce me. We are on the road to Charlotte, and so we're going to see Grandma in Charlotte. So thank you very much for being here today. We're so proud of this. It's got great things going on. You're in good hands with Kelly and Ed, so thank you very much.